What's bonkin', everybody, and welcome to Take Your Time, a Persona 5 podcast where we play Persona 5 Royal in real time, along with the in-game calendar dates, which is getting more and more difficult as we get into the next 2 months. But I am your host, Tom Marks, joined as always by Jonathon Dornbush. Jonathon. Hi.
Oh, hi. Hey, what's up? So on Monday, I hung out with Chihaya during the day, and I read a book at night.
That's not true. You can't hang out with Chihaya during the day.
I broke the game.
We do have more story stuff to talk about. The funny thing is that we would be going through the week of February 7th to February 13th, but all but February 13th are kind of skipped days. The funny thing is, though, the 13th actually has like a decent chunk of story stuff going on. So we do have like a fairly decent amount of things to talk about there.
Yeah.
We're also going to be talking about, as we mentioned last week, we're just going to be looking back on the Royal editions, specifically the third semester in total, just how we liked it, how, we talked a lot since both of us had already played the base game, kind of as we went, looking at what we did and didn't like about specific things. We haven't really done that for this third semester now that it's done. Obviously, there are still some little new things here and there that are coming up, but for the most part, the bulk of what's new in Royal is now seen and experienced, and we can talk about what we think there, especially with some of the new characters. And then after that, we're also going to finally talk about the last two party members of Haru and Futaba's Confidant lines, if we have time for both of them. But yeah, we missed them during the actual playthrough, so we want to go back and talk about them because both of their stories are pretty interesting. And so there's a ton. But first, let's do some housekeeping.
Yes.
Of answering the pop quiz from last week. My very convoluted, complicated pop quiz, which 2 people did get right.
Ooh.
Yeah. So Hannah and Thomas both got this one right, but the question was a 2-phase boss fight attack quiz, which was I gave 1 attack from Shido's first phase, 1 attack from the Holy Grail / Yaldabaoth's first phase, and then 1 attack from Maruki's first phase, and asked which one was Maruki's, and then I did the same thing for second phase moves. So, just to remind, the answers, or the possible choices for phase 1 were Light Edge, Tyrant Chaos, and Arm of Destruction, and then phase 2 was Origin Light, Tyrant's Fist, and Rays of Control. Jonathan, did you write down a guess for this?
I did. I got one of them. I wrote down Light Edge for the first one, and then Origin Light for the second.
Gotcha. So you went with the light theme.
I went with the light theme. For some reason in my head, I went really back and forth of like, would they split up words? Maybe, but let me just play it safe. And if I play it safe, I'll probably get 1. So I was trying to hedge my bets, basically.
Well, you did get 1.
Nice.
The correct answers for Maruki were Tyrant Chaos and Origin Light. Light Edge and Rays of Control were the Holy Grail and God of Control ones, and then Shido was Arm of Destruction, and then Tyrant's Fist. Why? He has 2 Tyrant's moves, I think, but why Maruki and Shido both have Tyrant attacks, I think is very funny. I guess they were both tyrannical.
They were in their own way. Yeah. But yeah, I was really torn on the Tyrant stuff because I associated it so much as Shido. And then I was torn because I associated Light as the god. So yeah, I was torn. But congrats to those who did get it right, which I believe you said were a couple.
Yes. The other thing that, I mean, it is interesting, right, that Maruki kind of like borrows not imagery specifically, but like words from the previous quote unquote final bosses, right? Where he takes a light move from the Holy Grail, and he takes a tyrant move from Shido is sort of, there's some things you could read into there if you want to do what we do and
a little bit,
dozens of hours talking about this game.
I will say I am curious. Hannah and Thomas both got that correct, but Thomas, and then also I realized via email, someone who goes by Hapsax also got that right, but they also guessed all three.
Yeah.
So how did Thomas do? Were Thomas's all correct?
Thomas's were all correct.
Okay. So that would mean Hapsax also got it all correct, which is extremely impressive because I didn't remember any of that.
Yeah. Well, the moves, I really enjoy boss fight move names because you only ever see them, a handful of times, and the name of it does not matter. Like, those moves could just not have names. And this isn't like a Persona 5 specific thing. Lots and lots and lots of RPGs do this. But I'm always enamored by what developers decide to call their boss moves that will basically never come up again, and the name doesn't matter.
I mean, yeah, I guess, when you think about how little of the audience actually plays most games in full anyway, they're probably used to it by now.
Sure.
But there's a pretty good percentage completion rate when it comes to Persona. So like half the people who play it seem to beat it. So that's a good sign, I guess.
Right. We also get some viewer comments. Jonathan, did you want to read some of those?
We did. Yes, I can read a few of these. The first one also comes from Hannah, who had gotten the question right. Said, for anyone wondering where Joker's third tier persona was, he does have one. He's just locked behind paid DLC. He's called Raoul, an alias of Arsene, and he looks really cool. Also, I know it was mentioned in previous episodes that everyone had their third awakening in their own homes. Akechi having his in the cafe kind of implies that it's the closest thing he has to a home. Just another little detail that makes that scene even sadder. As well as the dialogue choices affecting that scene. If you didn't max Akechi's Confidant, he doesn't even show up on February 2nd. Instead, Joker just talks with Maruki.
Dang.
And I think the whole that nice little, again, touch, whether intended or not, of LeBlanc being his home and where Joker is being his home really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And makes it even sadder.
It does.
Moving on from there, Red Panda commented, I think Jose is going to be involved in the Velvet Room in future Persona games. He has yellow eyes similar to Lavenza. It would have been better if he had his story explained to P5 because right now he just seems like an empty and forgettable character. And yeah, I could very well see that. I would say probably the eyes, at least certainly, I think to what, Tom, you were saying last week, imply that he is obviously very much like a character who belongs to these, meta characters of the Persona universe. Like he is part of that pantheon, but I do wonder if we'll see him again because we'll talk about the royal of it all in canon, I guess, at some point.
It'll be interesting. I think if they used this as a way to tease a future character in a future game or something like that, that would be cool.
Yeah.
But I don't really know if that is or isn't what is going on.
I just want to hear what happens when he eats anything that aren't flowers at some point. That's my big character growth for Jose. Maeve also commented and said, literally stopped my second playthrough on February 1st because I knew I wouldn't be able to emotionally handle February 2nd. It was too much for my little heart when I knew what was coming. Also, Atlas tweeted that day, February 2nd, I will carve my own path for myself, and turned off replies, and Akechi Stan Twitter lost their minds. It was excellent. Whoever runs that Twitter account was desperate for chaos. And I adore that because I totally missed that. That is so amazing.
That's pretty funny.
And then lastly, there were a bunch of great comments. I was just pulling a few. Faustine, I hope I'm not mispronouncing, said, what I find so interesting about the final battle is that while Maruki is ridiculously overpowered, it's in character for him to lose. Think about it, the final battle would never needed to happen at all. His reality warping powers were strong enough to nearly erase Lavenza unintentionally. If he really wanted to, he could make you and your whole party sleep forever, or he could just not give you a way to enter his palace, or he could have not given you a deadline and just gone ahead with his plan without your approval. He doesn't do those things. Because he likes and respects you, he doesn't want to hurt you. And because a desire to be liked and validated is part of his psychology, he wants you to agree by your own choice. That you and Maruki wouldn't agree is a secret fear of his, as he says at the end. Maybe that weakness that Futaba discovered is a manifestation of that fear, an act of unconscious self-sabotage, because deep down he knows you're right. And yeah. Dang. No, I mean, I totally, like, that comment really speaks to my thoughts about that whole battle, because it's a really fascinating thing that at the end of the day, none of that had to happen. If he just wanted to move ahead, with his plan, he could have just done that. Other than, of course, this being a video game that they want you to play through and they want you to overcome and be the hero and whatnot. Like,
Sure.
they could have just done that, and I think it is interesting that there are, like, alternate endings, which I know there was some discussion in the comments this week as a reference point. I'm not going to watch any alternate endings until we get to the ending of the game, just to kind of, like, be able to focus on that.
Yeah.
But, and maybe we can talk about that once I've seen that ending. But yeah, I think that totally tracks. Like, there is very much a part of him that if he had just gone ahead, I think that would have shown sort of like a true evil side, whereas there is a part of him that does still care.
Yeah. And, well, what I will say, do you mind me talking about the ending that is the if you miss the deadline ending? Because that one did come up.
You can mention that one.
If you miss the deadline, it's very funny. Maybe this was intentional for Faustine saying make you sleep forever, because I think it was Amy maybe in the comments posted about this, and if you miss the deadline ending, Maruki straight up is like, well, I hoped we could come to an agreement, but I'm just gonna make you truly happy forever so that you can never stop me. And he just makes Joker sleep in his bed forever. Like, it's really dark.
That's like, wild.
It's extremely dark.
He just sleeping beauties him? That's okay.
Yeah, you like check your phone. He shows Joker like checking his phone and being like, oh, well, I can stay in bed a little longer. And then it's just like zooms out and his room is covered in cobwebs and empty. And it's like horrifying.
Man, I mean, like, I'm not going to lie. That's the dream every morning. I don't want to get up for work because I'm too tired. But like, man, it gets dark if you stay asleep.
Yeah. So,
well,
the miss the deadline endings are always like, you have messed up, right? Like, they are always really bad endings.
Yeah, I assume it's partially to not make the player think like you did an okay thing. Like, sure, you made the choice that still works out. It's like, no, you have much more of the game. Go play it, please.
Yeah, those are much shorter too. Like, they're much more like fail states rather than alternate endings.
It's so good.
But let's get into the
day of the week.
The day of the week, which is February 13th. After this montage from last week, right? You jump to February 13th, which is Sai visiting you in prison, and revealing a lot of information. And this is, again, just about identical, not exactly, but just about identical to the base game now, right? There's little hints here and there of different things, but largely the same. So the first thing that happens is Sai shows up and visits you while you're in prison, and says that Shido will be found guilty, and it's largely thanks to your testimony, because in this universe, right, in this timeline, you did go to jail so that you could testify against Shido, and you were needed essentially as the link between the metaverse and him. Sai says that even with that, they're not going to get him on all charges, because the metaverse has still been incredibly hard to prove that it's real, especially now at this point when it's gone. So that's still difficult, but they're going to get him on some stuff. And then kind of the final point of this is that your innocence was proven, mm-hmm, and you're gonna be able to go free today. And a point I really quickly want to pull out of this, is that Sai says one of the main reasons your friends all helped you, there was support from all over, but the thing that really did it was somebody went back and found a witness from your incident a year ago and mm-hmm, had them come in and give testimony about what actually happened. And they were like, and she was like, man, I can't believe somebody was able to find that witness. It really, really was the key here. Which means Oya saved you.
Yep. Yeah.
In that montage, Oya's the one who's going back and talking to that witness at the location.
Which I guess you wouldn't see if your confidant line isn't maxed out, correct? Because all those scenes I think are max. So yeah, you wouldn't know who saved you, which is also a fun little thing. But I do think Oya would absolutely let you know that she was the one who saved you. That does not seem like being chill does not seem part of Oya's, professional career.
We gave Oya crap so many times.
We did.
And now here we are on February 13th, and she's the reason you're okay.
Yep. But also, I will say, is everyone in this universe just a shitty lawyer? Because, like, that should have been the first thing you do, is go back to the scene and try to find someone.
I did think it was funny that she was like, she made it sound like finding one person from a year ago was like this impossible task. It's not like this happened a decade ago. It's like that person probably still lives there.
Yeah, I mean, it's even less than a year, right? Technically, I guess.
From the incident, it might have been a year.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, it's a very funny it is absolutely, we have given Oya so much crap on this show, and I think it's fair to say that we were wrong. Oya did save us.
Yes.
But still, it is a very funny sort of case. I do like in the scene, she's talking about like the things they are going to get him on. I think it's like election laws, funding, and bribery. And she's like, we're only going to get him on those things, but it's a start. And I'm like, that's a lot of stuff to get a guy on for a first go around. But also, what are the laws that they would get him on for his crimes in the metaverse? Like,
Murder?
Yeah, but like, how can you prove that murder? That's the problem.
Yeah, or like collusion to commit murder. I'm not a lawyer.
Like subconscious murder.
Subconscious murder. I don't know. There's got to be laws for like doing people harm, regardless.
I don't think there's any laws about doing people harm. No, there's nothing in the law that says you can't do harm. But no, it sounds like things are going as smoothly as they can be, considering you can't access the metaverse. They can't. The Phantom Thieves are essentially not a thing right now because you can't do anything. Like, on the whole, it seems like things are going well. As you said, you're free to go. It came from all the way back then. I do like at the end of this, just in case you weren't sure about the theme of these kids having to do what the adults in society can't, she's like, adults need to lead society now. That's like a big thing she says to you before you leave jail. And it's like, yep, yes, they do. But if they don't, we're going to be right there. Waiting.
So that's the bulk of that scene, right?
Yeah,
It's just sort of her exposition dumping what has happened in the last month of dealing with Shido stuff and people supporting you.
I think it's also worth just mentioning, obviously, like you alluded to it last week, but we're in sort of base Persona 5 now again.
Mm-hmm.
So these are things that, royal players may not understand if they're playing for the first time, but some of what we're seeing here, most of what we're seeing here is very much like from the base game, how events went. So I guess don't feel like you're missing anything too major in the ending so far.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. From there, you get an anime cutscene, a very short anime cutscene of you leaving the prison and Sojiro picking you up and saying, let's go home. And then the cutscene ends and you get this really lovely, I really like this scene of you driving back with Sojiro in traffic and there's some accident. And so it's basically exactly mirroring the very first time way back at the beginning of the game when Sojiro drove you to school that one time and there was the accident in the trains and or in the subway. And yeah, I don't know. It's small, but I really do like this sort of book ending with this scene with Sojiro.
I mean, I really like the scene because it is a thing that movies will do a lot, but it's like a moment that hits after 2 hours, and it's like, here's a moment that hits after 120 hours of a small little character moment. And especially for us, a moment that's hitting almost a year after the first one. So it does really have like even more resonance in that way, which is really sweet.
Yeah, Sojiro's like, man, I can't believe that was almost a year ago. And it's like, oh, that was actually a year ago.
Yeah, it's really funny to have those moments actually in real life as we're playing the game now. I do also like the moment where he kind of just admits like he wasn't the greatest dude to you back then. Like, again,
yeah, he does.
We haven't gone fully into the Sojiro of it all, but like I have said many times how much I love that character, and I think the progression you see with him is some of the best in the game. And so to see him say things like this, even if you didn't, I think, do his full confidant line, you get moments like this toward the end of the game where it is like, you understand that Sojiro feels more sympathetic and more understanding to you than he did on those first couple months.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, I mean, it's nice. It's nice. It's a small little thing. They don't like belabor this point. It's not
totally.
a very long scene. And then immediately you get another anime cutscene that is the second half of this, where you're just arriving back at LeBlanc, and Sojiro parks his car incredibly quickly because he drops you off and then drives away and then is immediately next to you.
Where is their parking?
I don't know.
Those streets, you can't drive down Yonganjaya streets. Come on.
Yeah, it's all, none of it makes sense, but we're here for it. Persona in a nutshell. No. Actually, to be fair, as we've discovered over the last 9 months, a lot of this game makes more sense than you think it does.
Yep, yeah, it actually is pretty well buttoned up, and considering how massive of a game it is, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Anyway, you arrive in LeBlanc, the whole gang is there, except Sumire, she's not there yet. And you all celebrate, hooray, and then Sumire arrives late. I'm not sure why. I guess because it's easier to animate?
That's what I was assuming. Like, they were using parts of the scene from the base game, and it just made it easier to bring her in later.
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming. But maybe we're not giving them enough credit. Like, I don't know.
It's less of like this was a bad thing and more just like it's such a specific choice. And so I do, other than maybe perhaps showing, oh, she's still dedicated to her practice. Like, that is part of it, I guess you could say. Like, she's coming late from practice.
I mean, it could also be one of those, I don't actually know, but like, maybe if you just never hung out with Sumire or Maruki, you would never really get her story.
Maybe.
And you wouldn't know who she was outside of, like, her saving you in the palace that one time. I guess you'd still have to do that, right?
So this scene, because you technically can miss the third semester, right? Like, you can...
Yeah, so maybe she doesn't show up if you've missed the third semester, because she never joins the team.
Oh, yeah. Well, she still does, like, practice, though. So, like,
you still do stuff with her, yeah.
Well, no, I'm saying, like, she was still doing some practice and stuff before, if you do the whole third semester, obviously she dedicates herself more and everything. But before that, she was still doing practice. So this scene works whether or not you fully discovered everything about Sumire and went through all that. Because she's just kind of like, I'm just here for practice, but she's not a part of the core team.
Right.
So it does work in that way, I guess. But still... Then,
she would have never woken up to the fact that she was Sumire. Like, this is the funny thing.
Yeah.
Because you do the third semester, none of the stuff that happens in the third semester would have happened if you never hung out with Maruki. It's just like the world would have been fine. But technically, Sumire would still think she was Kasumi.
Yes. Maybe they change it? Maybe it says Kasumi
I bet she's not. I bet if you don't do the third semester, she's not there. That's my money.
Well, anyone who's been listening to this and decided not to do the third semester, please let us know.
Yes, thank you. Anyway,
we're getting hung up on this one.
Yeah, we're like reaching to the bottom of the cookie jar.
Not even intentionally. It's just such a funny, like, this is the one day. So I think we're like really hyper fixated on everything that happens because it's like, what does it mean?
So let's talk about the important stuff that happens here, which is...
Yeah, so I went fishing.
Yeah, they reveal that you're going home next month because you're no longer a felon, so you don't have any reason to... Your parents who abandoned you because you were too much trouble are now like, oh, we'll take you back. So you're going to go home, you're off of probation or whatever. You're going to go back home next month. And on top of that, Morgana is going to come with you because Morgana likes you and is just a cat now.
I would love to hear people's reactions who are playing for the first time, because I remember when that first came up in the base game when I played it, and I was crushed because it's like, oh my God, I care so much about this group being together. And the idea that, like, obviously Joker is still an underage kid, so he has to kind of abide by what adults in his life are telling him, especially now that he can't invade the metaverse. But it was just such a like, oh no, we can't be together anymore. Like, that is heartbreaking to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really sad to me too, because you forget that he's not from here at a certain point. I feel like Joker, he's just you don't ever see his original town. You never see his parents, nor are they ever really mentioned. So the idea that he would ever leave this place where he's now got his little family and he's got his little house and his cat is very sad.
Yeah. It reminds me of another RPG, but I don't need to get into Kingdom Hearts for an hour, so I'll just pass by. But yeah.
That's a different show. God, this is a tangent, but it would be so funny to do a Kingdom Hearts show in the way that we did this, where we like go through every world like it's a palace, because we would at certain points just be like recapping Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yep, yeah, it would be like, so hear me out. This crazy thing, this guy Jack Sparrow, he's not just a pirate. He once worked with these other pirates, and they found some gold. It would just be, like, hey, have you heard of Tarzan? Because here's the story of Tarzan. Yeah, it would be very, we'd probably get a DMCA takedown by
it's
Disney.
True. Yeah. So Morgana's coming back with you. You're doing going away party, and then Morgana demands sushi for a also going away for him party, and everyone is really rude and dismissive.
Yeah.
It's like very alarming. There's also a really wonderful moment where Sojiro comes in and Morgana and Sojiro have a conversation, and Sojiro's still like, I can't understand you. And then there's a moment where Morgana and Ryuji immediately after that start getting into an argument, and like that means that Sojiro's just watching Ryuji argue with a cat.
It's just what he hears back.
Like, just visually the idea of like Ryuji just yelling at a cat who's meowing at it.
Ryuji essentially
threatening violence against this cat.
Threatening violence and essentially having to defend that he's not an idiot against the cat is like what it often boils down to. And so anyone who can't understand Morgana is just seeing a teenage boy yell at a cat to stop calling him stupid.
Yeah.
It's great.
And then you celebrate, and then after that you get a moment with Morgana on your bed where Morgana very conveniently is just like, hey, how did I turn into a helicopter that one time? That doesn't make any sense. And then it's like, oh wait, it must have been Jose's star. And you pull out the star and it's gone dim. So apparently the wish granting magic is gone from it. I just love this, like, they felt the need to explain this moment. It's very funny.
I didn't necessarily need it because my assumption was like, well, if he can turn into a van, he can probably turn into something else. You know? Yeah. Like, I don't think it needs to stop there. That's not really the logical limitation of imagination of a cat into a bus. So him turning into a helicopter was fine with me. But yeah, it's just another explanation. I think it gives Jose a little bit more retroactive importance to being part of things. Because at least he was involved here. But yeah, it's just a funny little moment to end things on.
Yeah, and then you get a text from, well, if you were dating someone, you get a text from the people you're dating basically saying, hey, can we hang out tomorrow night? Tomorrow being Valentine's Day, or if you're listening to this podcast, happy Valentine's Day if you're listening on release day. And
I hope you're all spending a wonderful Valentine's Day dinner listening to Take It. Honey, how should we settle in for the evening? I like that, just if we're part of your life in that way. Thank you for having us, I guess.
Yeah. And so if you're dating multiple people, you get to choose who you're going to go hang out with, or you can still say no one. Obviously, I was only dating Haru, so I said yes to Haru, and I'm assuming you just said yes to Makoto, and we'll get to the ramifications of that tomorrow. Next week, I should say. And yeah, that's the day. That's the whole week. So there's some good story stuff in there. There's some good things to talk about that I'm glad we are doing this still this way. And there's going to be, I think, 2 more days next week that we can dig into, some of which is pretty funny. I love the Valentine's Day thing. It's very goofy, and we can talk about some of the alternate scenarios for that. And then, but let's talk about the third semester as a whole, because we started discussing this a little bit, but again, this was fresh to you. It was my second time through it for me. And what did you think, kind of generally speaking, about this chunk of time, this extra palace, the way it's weaved into everything, kind of all of that.
I think, like, considering that it is a thing that was ultimately tacked on to a base game and fit into the narrative rather than be something that happens like post game, because that's often what you'll see with like a DLC like this, is either it's a post game thing or you can go off to the side and do this, but it won't really affect your main focus in the game. This can have pretty big ramifications, at least on an emotional and character level. So I think like the way they integrated it on the whole works probably as best as it could have. It's obviously, I think, dealing in a very big common cliche when it comes to, you know, alternate realities and what life would be like and if things happen a certain way and whatnot. You know, with Maruki's kind of vision of what life could be. It's definitely working in familiar ground, but I think the way it seeds everything leading up to it is what makes it work for me so well. Like the fact that Yoshizawa-san and Maruki are part of the game all the way through, and even though they're relatively minor parts other than key scenes for them throughout, I think that makes them feel so much more like the wider experience. And I think that's probably one of the most impressive things. Like the content of the semester aside, I feel like they integrated them and the new Akechi stuff really well on the whole into your experience. So that, like, you know, a day where I'm going to go to therapy with Maruki or hanging out with Kasumi or Akechi doesn't feel like okay, I'm going into a new part of the game. It just feels like part of what you're doing in the Persona 5 world. So for me, that worked really well. It is a little bit funny that it is kind of like you did all of this massive stuff and then things are just back to normal. At least in comparison to the way that the game ended. Like, that is just the problem with putting something like this into a game like this. You can't, unless you majorly change the ending, you can't really disrupt the status quo too much. Right. So, sorry, I'm going on a ramble, but just like to get my general ideas out from a first-time experience. I think that lessens a little bit of the impact, but at the same time, all of the stuff with Akechi works so well. I think everything with Sumire, minus the romance angle of it, works really well. And I think your relation to Maruki is really well done too.
Well, let's talk about Sumire since you mentioned it, because there's some stuff in there that I want to talk about too that you talked about. But first, we didn't go over Sumire's like last 5 confidant levels, and I don't want to belabor them right now, but I do want to talk about a little bit kind of how they are structured and what they result in, which is the first 5 were all about Kasumi trying to find herself and not understanding why she can't do these things that she knew she could do before and trying to find out who she is. And then the second half is all about her realizing that she had absolutely no idea who she was, literally.
Yeah.
And now she needs to find her own voice and stop trying to be like Kasumi in her gymnastics and in her life, right? And what ultimately happens is she figures it out, right? She figures out who she is. She finds her own style. Her coach is very supportive of her, but also very hard on her to say, like, you're not getting it. You need to do, like, you really need to stop trying to be your sister, because your sister actually looked up to you, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't know this about her, but she was really competing with you when you thought she was way better than you. And so she finds confidence there.
Totally. I just want to say, I'm the coach. I was actually pleasantly surprised, because obviously that's like a bit of a new angle for her. I was pleasantly surprised at how much the coach is like, nah, you're not, like, you can keep pushing yourself harder, like, believe in yourself more, like, you're not there where you think you should be, but, like, you're capable of it. It wasn't just a, woo, you're doing it, yay. Like, It wasn't that. It was much more.
The coach is a cool character. She's interesting in that way. And then, of course, it culminates in them really assuming you're gonna date Kasumi. Because we talked about Haru's moment of, like, heartbreak, right? Which we'll talk about a little more later, I guess, of, like, she really is expecting you to like her, and then you can kind of go either way.
Yeah.
Kasumi straight up at the cafe is just like, I love you. And you can be like, I love you too, or let's just be friends.
Yeah.
And if you're just like, let's just be friends, she takes it really well. But, like, she straight up says, I love you, which no other character is that kind of forthcoming. The
For
closest
sure.
probably is Chihaya asking you if you like older women, right? Like, it is that's sort of the second most blunt any of them are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that part I thought was sort of funny. I think it makes sense, and I will say, on my first playthrough, I did date her, and it felt very natural as a result. But if you don't date her, it is sort of obvious how much the game is trying to matchmake you.
Yes, yeah, it's very. That's the thing that I think was the biggest problem for me on a like meta level was that the game very much, and we had talked about it like long before then, but like the game very much seemed to imply that Kasumi / Sumire was going to be your new romantic interest. And I think like
Right.
if the game was just leading up to that and there weren't all the other dating options there, it would have been more natural. Not that like someone can't have dated multiple people in their lives, but just like you otherwise would miss little dating moments and you know, little occasions during holidays or things like that to have those connections. And then it's kind of like, well, then why is it there to begin with? Like it starts to bring up those questions for me.
Sure.
But I think for me, the reason I didn't, not just because I was dating Makoto and was not making my Joker poly on this playthrough, was because like my thinking and rationale was Sumire, the person who's telling me they love me, I have only known for 2 weeks. At the end of the day, like I've only known who this human being is for real for 2 weeks, and not that it's not possible for these two characters. And I think, again, like you were saying, based on not just the game leading you there, but I think the way it seems natural for the two of them, probably would date in the future. But like right now, it was like you need to still deal with a lot, and Joker can be there for you, but I think putting a romance on that person's mind is not like the healthiest thing for them to be going through.
Sure.
At the moment.
Yeah.
So I chose not to, but yeah.
Speaking of romance,
yes.
One thing we've already talked about that we don't need to talk about much is I think definitely the best thing, and you already said this, but the best thing that this DLC does, or not DLC, sorry, this extra content does is Akechi, right? Akechi's relationship with you, the way they expand the Confidant line, the way they deepen that character, the new things they teach you about him in the third semester are just phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think to the point where they overshadow Kasumi and Sumire and Maruki. Maruki especially because outside of his Confidant line, he's just sort of, he's not really there between the sessions you spend with him and like the actual third semester. And it's not that it feels, like you said, I think it sets it up well, and I like that they incorporate it that way, but Maruki is just sort of like, he feels like this force that sort of just like is a little bit outside of that kind of larger threat, if that makes sense. Whereas Akechi is so great because he's so tied to the original threat, and then he is so tied to the new threat, and as a result, it is this really, really interesting, nuanced like picture you get of this character.
I think he does definitely, he benefits so much more because he was already part of the base game. Like it is just the thing where it is, because he is so naturally a part of those other events, he just fits into it more. And I agree. I think they could have probably done more to make Maruki a little bit more involved. It would probably have meant him finding out you were a Phantom Thief early, because there's almost a world where you could have made it like after each palace, you could have had almost a therapy session with him. Sure, and talked about things.
I don't necessarily think they need to have done that.
No, not. I'm just saying in terms of like a like really anchoring him to everything. I guess his way, but I think for me, Maruki still works really well on a character level, not just because like there is obviously something with Kasumi in terms of her becoming a party member. You know that from the start that she is going to be a Phantom Thief and is going to be involved in some way. Akechi is even if you've never played the game before, it's just like, you know that at the beginning. Akechi is a main player in the story both in the base and the DLC from very early on. Maruki is just, as you said, sort of there, and you get the idea that he has ties to Yoshizawa-san at points and things like that, but you don't really get much more from him until very late in the game. And
to be clear too, like that was more in praise of Akechi than criticism.
No, of course. I just mean like I think what's interesting about that is though it is this like, okay, when is the other shoe going to drop? What is Maruki then? If he's not a party member, if he's not this, what is he? And I do think what he becomes is really interesting. And yeah, that was just a side tangent for me of like how I think the three characters work here. Because I do agree, I think Akechi's additions are my favorite, but I do still really love a lot from the other two so much.
Yeah, Maruki's whole kind of... I really appreciate this whole section because Maruki is such a gray character, right? Obviously, he's doing things that they've eventually realized are sort of badly motivated and all that stuff, but I appreciate how weird and complex this whole situation is, where the original villain was so sort of black and white evil. And this was a different flavor. If it had just been another big black and white evil villain, it would have sort of been weird.
Yes.
And I really like that all this stuff is incorporated. But here's where I'm going to get a little bit negative. Because I really love Royal. I love all the stuff it adds. I love all the changes it makes. It is, in my opinion, definitively the best version of Persona 5 because of all of the gameplay changes it makes.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last semester weakens the story overall.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that its story is bad. I really do like its story. I really like its characters. I like all of that. I think the fact that you go from this huge climactic moment of beating Shido and you think you've beaten the game to a certain extent, and then everything gets worse and you're like, what's going on? And then you go into Mementos and you find all this stuff out and you're erased from existence, and then you fight your way back and Igor is fake the entire time, and then the world merges with Mementos and you have to fight literal God powered by the world cheering for you. And then you're like, great, we did it. And then you play more of the game. And the kind of third semester that you get is really interesting and complex in its own way, but it is also strangely higher and lower stakes at the same time. And when it resolves, none of it ever happened. And like, you just go back to what was originally there. And I think that is so weird story-wise. I think that it really kills the momentum of the finale of the base game in favor of this inserting this other thing. And it doesn't kill it to the, like, it's not a disaster. I'm not trying to say this is, I still love all of this content. And I still absolutely recommend people do the third semester, right? It's just, it does, in my opinion, weaken the story overall in favor of putting a cool story in the middle of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm just like a little conflicted on that. It's not earth-shattering, but that's kind of how that's how I came away from it originally, is I was like, this was really, really cool, but also like, I kind of wish this had just been like, and this is the trick of this. This is the trick of Royal, right? If it had just been standalone DLC in the way a lot of other games do standalone DLC, you wouldn't have gotten Maruki and Kasumi and the Akechi stuff all weaved into the original base game, which I think works really, really well, as we've talked about. But because you do that, you can't take this away, and you have, like, I just wish that they had figured out a way to incorporate this in December, and then moved all of the December finale stuff to January. But there's no way you can do that structurally without changing huge portions of the plot and huge portions of the game. And so that's like, it is this really complex puzzle. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to solve, but it feels like it should have been before the main finale of the game and been slightly lower stakes or something, just been another palace, right? Um, and since it's not, it's like it is higher stakes, which is exciting, but then it's doing this other thing. I don't know. Like
Oh,
it's a big messy picture in my mind, but
no,
like I hope I explained what I mean, kind of.
I think you do, because I don't totally feel dissimilarly from you. Like, I really really loved so much of it, but
Yeah.
it is, from a storytelling and momentum and, escalation standpoint, it is weird. It is jarring, and I think it shows one of the fundamental flaws of trying to do this in a video game. Whereas, like, as much as we love so much of the content, when you think about it from the whole picture, it, like, this feels like them doing the director's cut of Persona 5. But you see, like, the director's cut, literally, as it's named, of Ghost of Tsushima, and Iki Island is a separate thing that you can go to and can venture to. Is the same with, like, Horizon Zero Dawn and the Frozen Wilds. It's like, it's there, you can go to it after a certain level is when it's recommended, but it won't affect what you've done in the base game. That said, you do lose out on the things like, integrating Kasumi, Akechi, and Maruki through the whole thing. And I agree with you. I think it makes that all stronger. Plus, the gameplay refinement that they were able to do makes everything just at the base level more fun and better as an experience. So yeah, it is, as you said, like, I don't know if there's a simple solve, because I think if we didn't get the Royal season and just got, like, a quality of life patch for Persona, I don't think we'd be doing this show. Like, I don't think a lot of people wouldn't find a reason to replay the entire game, which is part of the goal here, I think.
Yeah.
So it is that, it's that weird give and take of, like, I assume we're going to get this with Persona 6 at some point, because Persona 4 Golden was, an upgraded version. I don't know the content there, so I'm not saying it's a 1-to-1, and so forgive me for those who have played, and please don't spoil it for me, because I do want to play Golden at some point. But, like, they obviously did a deluxe edition of that game. I think they did for Persona 3 even. They at least did some different versions of it. And so it's like, this seems like it is just part of the way they do Persona now. And at least in this case, I'm still very much fresh off of it. I largely agree with you in terms of, I think, the story itself, when you look at, like, what happens during the third semester and what it means for the characters, I think is really great. I think the characters that they integrated into the story are really well done. And I think obviously all the gameplay additions they make it the best way to play. But it is, in terms of a, like, overarching story, as we are still now doing the show for a few weeks to talk about the last few cutscenes that otherwise would have probably been, 20 minutes of time after the Shido boss fight. Now it's coming after another 10, 12, 15 hours of the game. And it's not bad that it does, but it inherently makes it harder to keep that momentum going.
Yeah. Exactly. It's, again, I really love this story that they tell. I like that it's so gray, but it is just always struck me as odd that you go from killing God to, like, this month-long dream that then they pretend doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the original game, the base game, rolled off of killing God into a really nice hour-long emotional sort of finale montage. And that is a very different pace of storytelling.
I mean, it's kind of what happens when a TV show thinks they're over and they write an ending, and then they have to come up with another season of TV. Like,
right.
This happened to Chuck on NBC. Literally every half season, they were like, we're going to be canceled after these 13. All right, we'll write a finale. Oh, wait, they ordered 9 more episodes for the season. Okay, but that's the end. Oh, wait, no, they picked us up for another season. And that literally happened like 6 times. Like, Chuck the show has 4 or 5 series finales to it because they just didn't know. And so it is essentially like putting an extra season of a TV show after the series finale has happened, but also part of the series finale airs after that extra season. It is a weird, like you said, I don't know what the exact right answer would be, because I am so happy we got all this stuff.
Yeah, and I don't think that, again, I don't think that the answer that they went with is incorrect.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't think that I'm going, how could they do it this way? Because all the other things I suggested and all the other things that I would have preferred are complex and hard and might not work for other reasons.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
So it's not like I'm saying they did it wrong. It's just that the ramifications of the way they did it is a little bit of a speed bump in the overall story. But yeah, ultimately, I really liked this semester. I think one of the really nice touches, just really quick, is like all the little mini games have an extra thing, right? Like we talked about this a little bit. Like the baseball has an extra like course you can do. The fishing has an extra special fish you can get.
Yeah.
There's new things here and there. Like they really did make it feel like there was a little bit more to what was going on rather than just it being more game. So I liked all of that.
Totally.
Even a really simple thing like all of them having new outfits is just like a nice little touch, or it's just an added little extra thing.
Yeah, no, it like as someone again coming just fresh off it, and so I'm still processing, I think, a lot of things. But I really, really enjoyed the content of all of it, and I'm so happy I got to spend more time with these characters that I love and see them go through more things. Like that's why I'm also so excited to eventually play Strikers, is because I just love this cast so much. But yeah, it is, I think on a structural level, it shows somewhat of the limitations of what you can do when integrating content like this. For some people, it probably, and very much maybe for some listening, and I'm curious what people thought, did work for them. And maybe there is, because at the end of the day, Maruki's palace does become a more personal thing for everyone. It's not like Shido, obviously everyone understands the gravity of it, but he really at the end of the day has the most connection with Akechi and Joker. That's really where it comes down. And everyone else is just kind of there because they're your friends, and want to not let the world die.
Like I'm not implying either that Maruki's palace is disconnected from the other story.
Oh no, I know.
Right.
I'm just saying on like a stakes level.
Yeah. I think that there is sort of an interesting parallel of thinking about Maruki's palace as like, well, they just saved the world and stopped a god from making it the way the god wanted to make it. But they did that for their own vision of the world. And now they're faced with this other vision of the world. And it basically is like asking them like, okay, you saved the world from being this thing that a malevolent force wanted it to be. So like, what do you actually want the world to look like? Right?
Yeah.
Posing that question to that group is an interesting one. It's just not one that it is, like you said, it is an extra episode after the finale, not integrated into it.
It almost feels like it could have fit as the basis for a sequel. Like I think you could have done an almost a literal Persona 5 2 at looking at things from that more emotional, personal standpoint, like you just said, of, okay, you stop the world from this version. What is the version you think it should be? And is that fair for you to want for everyone else? And yeah, like, I think the questions it poses are totally great. But yeah, just on a momentum of the story thing, it does throw off. And obviously we're coming at it from, having played the base game. So I am curious, especially for people who are playing through Royal for the first time and that's their first Persona 5 experience, to let us know how it feels. I'd be very curious to hear that perspective. Yeah.
And it's also funny because if, when you do play Strikers, boy, do they ignore all this.
Well, I guess without spoiling it, because I do know, obviously, the setup for Strikers, but Strikers is a sequel to Persona 5, not to Persona 5 Royal, for those wondering.
Basically, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Persona 5 Strikers, literally in one of the trailers, it says P5-2, and then the 2 gets knocked away and replaced with an S.
Yes. I remember that day in the office when we watched that.
It is a literal sequel.
Yeah.
And yeah, it basically doesn't talk about any of the Royal stuff at all. Some of it is left ambiguous in that you can just say, oh yeah, maybe Royal happened, but a lot of the stuff is also like it doesn't, what's the right way to put it? It does not retcon Royal. It just doesn't address it in any way.
I guess it's sort of like right now with Star Wars, the comics are considered canon, but the shows don't really follow the comics unless they want to pull stuff in. Like the shows and movies of Star Wars are kind of rude to the comics as much as I love the comics. Like they'll change things if they feel like they want to, which is unfortunate. Yeah. But yeah, it feels like Royal. I need to go back and look at
You'll see when you get there.
For sure. I need to go back and look at the dev times, but I would assume that heavily comes into it, where it's like they were developing Royal probably at the same time Strikers was being developed because it's not the same team, and it just made sense to go off of what existed for people because it also released a year early in Japan than it did in North America. So.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. Is it just was simultaneous development.
Yeah.
Anyway. We've got time to go through one of the Confidant lines. We'll save the other one for the next for next week because we certainly will have time to talk about more Confidants. Let's talk about Futaba because that was one we were going to do before.
Yes.
Futaba's Confidant line is interesting to me. It's a very fun one. I like it a lot, but also it is one where it does feel like I guess what I'll say is I like that it is showing growth that sort of is implied in the main story, right? Because the conflict line revolves around her going through this promise list with you that you make early on. I think it's in like the rank 2 thing. You make a promise list with her, and the promises are to go somewhere with lots of people, to go to school, to have a normal conversation with someone her age, and then be alone without you. And it's you working through these things, obviously not directly one-to-one, but in the actual main game, Futaba goes from being like a shut-in to having her heart changed to being completely confident around people. Not completely, but like much more confident around people very quickly.
Yeah.
And it feels a bit like this one is definitely going back and saying like, okay, let's see her work through some of this stuff with Joker first.
Totally. Yeah. It's you could have gotten, I think, the bulk of understanding of what happens to her, but seeing it, I think, step by step here lends again what I see as a very like brother-sister relationship to the story.
Yes.
I know obviously that like Futaba is a romance option in the game, so the game doesn't only allow you to see them as that necessarily, but for me it very much is like an older brother, little sister, her learning her way through the world and sort of this makeshift family that is her, Joker, and Sojiro, and just coming to terms with all that stuff and getting more of that, I think is really great because Futaba is such an endearing character on the whole.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So there's the way that this Confidant line also goes, right, is you go somewhere with lots of people, you take her to Akihabara, right? And do that, and then the next one is you go to school and there's kind of a funny scene where you're walking around with Makoto, right, going to the school, just like seeing stuff, and she handles it all pretty much fine. Then the next promise is you have this you take her to the cafe with or to the diner with Mishima, and she's basically just like insulting Mishima the entire time.
She chooses the "what are you talking about" dialogue option with Mishima every time. It basically, that tone of like what, it's really cute, and I think again shows different like this promise list shows the different sides of what she's adapting to, and I think as you've said, you were just sort of mentioning it, but across the show as a whole, it's not as if she's incapable of these things,
right,
at her core, and I think these scenes show she can adapt to that pretty quickly. It's just she's been in such a state that it is getting back into the flow of processing other human beings as part of your life.
Yeah, exactly. And then after that scene with Mishima, she reveals that she lied about one of the promises on her promise list with her mom, which is getting along with a girl named Kana. And she says, she had this terrifying moment where she ripped open Kana's diary on the schoolyard and saw some stuff about how her parents were abusive to her, and then they never spoke to each other again, and it was very sad. And then she finds out that Kana is nowadays being like exploited by her parents in really gross ways, like making her take photos on posting them, selling them online, like really awful stuff.
Yeah.
And so you get a request to go into Mementos and change your parents' heart, which you do, and then find out that Kana is doing much better, and Futaba and her are chatting and talking and being friends again, and they both have dedicated themselves to going back to school the next year. And that's pretty much like she works through this demon, right, of kind of saving someone from a bad situation, not exactly the type of bad situation she was in, because obviously she didn't have to go through parental abuse, but she saves her from this bad situation in a similar way that somebody came in and helped Futaba, right? And then that's basically that, right? You have a debrief with her where you can start to date her, and again, I think it is very, you do you, but I think it is in the context of the story strange to date Futaba because of the familial sort of connections.
Sure.
Sojiro even at one point says, "Don't get with Futaba." And you are referred to as a family many times in the main story. So like the idea that you're like actually dating her is just like, it's very strange that they even make this an option. Is my
I think it comes down to like again it's frustratingly along gender lines here for players, but It is very much like unless I'm wrong, is it pretty much every female confidant is dateable?
Not Sai.
Not Sai, true. Well, her confidant line, to be fair, is a little...
It's not real.
Yeah. But other than that, and I guess...
Wouldn't it be funny if in the interrogation, you get to rank 8 in the interrogation, and she's like, okay, I'll show this phone to Akechi. Also, what are you doing later?
Yeah. Hey, look, you're in real big trouble, and I'm going to do what I can to help you, but also you want to get out of here right now?
Yeah.
Oh, no,
it's
sorry.
Totally to your point of they wanted to make every female character dateable, and so they did regardless of the intent or ramifications or implications of any of that.
And it is silly because I do think it makes the gender line of it all even more obviously pointless, because there are people, I would argue, not even just Akechi, but that like there are other people in the game that I could argue Joker probably has more chemistry with on a romantic level than Futaba by quite a bit throughout all of this. So yeah, I think it's just a holdover of that. But yeah, and again, as you were saying, like if people chose to do that, it is your call to see the characters the way you want to see them at the end of the day. That's how RPGs work. But I think for both of us, seeing her through that lens of being the little sister and everything, I really like this because you're there to help and guide and support, but at the end of the day, most of the breakthroughs do come from Futaba, because she not just obviously has experience being a human with other humans and just has been in a traumatic experience and needs to work through that, but seeing her go through her list of promises and everything, you get sort of these vague looks at how she wants to approach it, and then Kana becomes this very specific and emotionally tied to her past example of how to work through that. And so it becomes this thing where it is, I think had they introduced a character of like, oh, she just started talking to this person online, like that wouldn't have meant as much for Futaba, whereas this being someone everything she went through, like someone from her childhood that matters to her more, I think really helps solidify her growth and her strength as a character, which I really like.
Yeah, it's a good confidant line, right?
Yeah.
It's a good mix of fun little moments and nice emotional stuff, and you just get a good sort of variety of things going on.
Yeah, and her skills aren't bad to have. You know, yes. A lot of them are random chance ones, but
right,
it's a good set of every time Futaba shows up in a battle and is like, hold on, I'm gonna help, I'm like, oh my god, thank you. Even if I don't need it at the time, it's just like, yeah, let's do this.
And also Royal did the added the really lovely thing. I guess this isn't technically Confidant, but Royal did the thing where if you all-out attack, Futaba has a chance of getting her own little all-out attack animation, so she's incorporated a little more in that way.
She throws the bomb, right? Is that her thing?
Yeah, she drops a bomb and then it doesn't go off, and she taps on it.
There
and
we
it
go.
Blows up. It's super cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Futaba's story. I think again, most of her like tangible change happens in her palace, but this is just a really good sort of, you know, digging into it a little deeper, unpacking it a little bit more, and I like that. And
it's a practical look.
Yeah, and it comes with some nice moments too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just the whole that's also just going back to earlier of like Joker going home. That sort of stuff makes him going home so much harder, because it's like, no, Sojiro and Futaba and the cafe is his home and the friend group is his family. Like that's what it is about. And I think getting to see all of these confidant lines through just helps kind of solidify that as you play through.
Yeah. We'll save Haru for next week.
Yeah.
She's the last party member we need to talk about, and we do have a couple other people that we haven't discussed confidant wise. And also next week we just have more story stuff. It's gonna be Valentine's Day. It's gonna be I think it's 2 days, Valentine's Day and the day after. And we'll have some good stuff to talk about there.
Oh yeah.
But first, let's wrap up with some quizzes. Jonathan, do you have a Persona pseudonym for me? And is it gonna be incredibly hard?
I'm still pulling from Maruki. I don't believe I've done this one yet. If I have, audience, please forgive me. I'm hoping it's a relatively simple one for now, but who is... I almost just said their name. Who is the spear-wielding general? Ooh, that would have been fun, would be to make you guess what their pseudonym was by their real name. That would
wouldn't be a thing I could do.
I would be so hard. Yeah.
I think I know this one.
Okay.
Is this Kuchu Lane?
Yes.
Hey!
Which I'm glad you said that because I was going to add an extra H in there because Choo-Choo Lane is easier to say for me. But yes, that is...
Well, I don't know if that's the actual pronunciation, but it's like C-U.
Yeah, space
and then,
Chulane or Chulane, yeah. From both origins in Irish and Scottish mythology. Originally appeared in Megami Tensei, so a very early character, I guess.
Irish, Scottish, really?
Both of those mythologies are listed as origins on the Persona fandom wiki.
I wouldn't have expected that, because that character is like in kind of silver armor with like long black hair, right? It's like...
There's something about them that does read very like high fantasy, like elven or like Lord of the Rings-ish to me, so I guess, you know.
Visually, I read it almost as like Chinese mythology.
Oh, I see that too. Yeah, that's right as well.
It kind of reminded me of like the Three Kingdoms era armor style.
Oh,
almost,
yeah.
But like, I don't know enough about that mythology to know if that is accurate.
Well, Tom, we're both history
Obviously
majors,
it's not.
So you know, obviously we can jump in. But no, yeah.
Okay, so I've got a quiz for you now.
Okay.
Which I came up with during the show because you stole mine.
Oh no! What was it?
I was gonna ask what you've only done this like twice the entire show, which is pretty impressive because we don't go over what my quizzes are gonna be.
We don't. No, I have no idea beforehand.
I was gonna make up a charge that Shido was charged with.
Okay.
A crime that Shido was charged with, and ask you to pick out the wrong one. But
that makes sense.
Came up with them all.
For listeners, there was a moment I noticed where Tom was intently staring off camera, and I was like,
Oh yeah, that was when I was trying to find a new quiz.
Exactly. Anyway, what is your new quiz? I apologize.
I think I have. A funny thing is, I found two.
Okay.
But I think I'm gonna go with a simpler one.
Okay.
Sai, when she comes and talks to you at the prison, tells you about how you taught her how to live, and you helped her with seeing the truth of the world and you know, being her best self, I guess.
And then she asks you to get out of there because she's in love.
You stole my quiz again. So, the question is, based on Sai's change of heart? Question mark?
Sure.
What is Sai's new job going to be? Because she tells you that she's changing careers or jobs.
Oh, I missed that. Yeah, I definitely missed that.
What does Sai say that she's gonna do for her new work?
Balloon animal artist.
Balloon animal. What?
Making people happy. Who doesn't love a stranger on the street being like, take this dog I made out of balloons? I learned to do that actually as a kid for a little while. I got like a kit with a bunch of like design examples and stuff. Yeah.
Expecting a joke, I did not expect this.
Well, the second part's not a joke. That was just a thing I did in my childhood for like 6 months.
I think all kids have a moment of that at least.
Probably, you would hope. Yeah, it was after my fossil interest, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
that was after the marine biologist phase.
of course,
yeah.
Before I loved going to the aquarium.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the phases of childhood.
Exactly. The different ages, yes. Anyway, you can leave a comment at youtube.com/Dornology. You can email us at dornology@gmail.com. I'm at Tom R. Marks on Twitter. He's at JM Dornbush on Twitter. Let us know what the answer is. Leave a comment if you're liking us. Subscribe or rate if you do too, because we appreciate it. And yeah, I guess we'll be back next week with Valentine's Day and some more juicy story stuff to talk about.
Happy Valentine's Day to everyone celebrating.
Yeah.
You know? But no, legitimately, I think we have gotten comments before from people who listen as couples. So, like, legitimately, for those out there who listen, hope you're having a happy Valentine's Day if you celebrate.
Yeah, and next week's episode will be for you.
It's gonna be steamy.
We should, like, just put, like, some low jazz on the entire time. Yeah.
We gotta film at night so we can get, like, candle-lit backgrounds and just have it be real romantic. Yep, a week after Valentine's Day.
Anyway, I'm calling it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We gotta go to bed. Morgana's being mad at us for one of the last times. See you next time.